A tiny puppy stood in the middle of a road, refusing to move. Cars passed. People ignored it. But one police officer stopped. At first, Officer Daniel thought it was just another stray, lost, hungry, looking for attention. Nothing unusual. "Go home, buddy," Daniel said gently, trying to shoo him away. But the puppy didn't move. Instead, it just sat there, staring at him, waiting. This little pup wasn't like the others. No matter how many times Daniel tried to walk away, the puppy followed him step by step, refusing to give up. "Go on, buddy, you shouldn't be here," Daniel said, gently nudging it away. But the puppy still didn't move. Instead, it sat there, staring at him, not begging, not scared, almost like it was trying to tell him something important, something urgent. Daniel felt a strange knot in his chest. Years on the force had taught him to trust his instincts, and right now, something didn't feel right. Why was this puppy so determined? What could a tiny puppy possibly want from a trained police officer? And when Daniel finally decided to follow it, when he discovered the truth behind why this puppy wouldn't leave him alone, he didn't just stand there. He broke down in tears. Stay with us. This story will leave you speechless. Before we start, make sure to hit like and subscribe. And really, I'm curious, where are you watching from? Drop your country name in the comments. I love seeing how far our stories travel. The morning shift had just begun when Officer Daniel stepped out of his patrol car, the cool air brushing against his face. It was one of those quiet mornings. No chaos, no urgency, just the soft hum of a city slowly waking up. He adjusted his uniform, scanning the street with a calm focus that came from years of experience. Everything seemed normal, too normal. Daniel had learned long ago that silence could be deceiving. He began walking down the sidewalk, his boots making steady, rhythmic sounds against the pavement. A few early commuters passed by, barely noticing him. Somewhere in the distance, a car engine started, and a dog barked faintly from behind a fence. Then another sound. A soft, quick patter. Daniel stopped. He turned slightly, his eyes narrowing as he looked behind him. Nothing. Just an empty stretch of road. He exhaled and shook his head, thinking it was probably nothing more than his imagination playing tricks on him. It happens sometimes, especially during quiet shifts like this. He continued walking. Step, step, step. And then again, that same soft sound. Closer this time. Daniel turned more quickly now, his instincts sharpening. That's when he saw it. A tiny puppy stood a few feet behind him. Small, fragile, barely bigger than his boot. Its fur was a mix of dark brown and black, slightly messy, like it had been wandering alone for a while. Its ears twitched as it looked up at him, its wide eyes filled with something Daniel couldn't quite place. Curiosity? Fear? Or something else entirely? Daniel sighed softly. "Well, where did you come from?" he muttered under his breath. The puppy didn't move. It just stood there, staring at him. For a moment, Daniel simply watched it. He had seen plenty of stray animals before. This wasn't unusual. The streets weren't exactly kind to small creatures like this. He crouched slightly, extending his hand just a little. "Hey there, buddy." The puppy tilted its head, but instead of stepping forward, it stayed exactly where it was, still watching him. Daniel straightened up again, brushing the thought aside. "All right," he said quietly. "You should probably head back home." He turned and started walking again, expecting that to be the end of it. But after only a few steps, he heard it again, that same soft patter. Following him, Daniel stopped mid-step. A faint crease formed on his forehead. Slowly, he turned his head. The puppy had moved closer now, just a little, still keeping its distance, but clearly following him. Daniel let out a small breath, somewhere between amusement and confusion. "You've got to be kidding me." He glanced around, half expecting someone to come running out and claim the little thing. But no one did. The street remained quiet, still, empty. And when he looked back down again, the puppy was still there, watching him, waiting. And for the first time that morning, something about it didn't feel normal, not even close. Daniel stared at the tiny puppy for a moment longer, then shook his head and turned away again. "Not today," he muttered under his breath. He had a job to do. Stray animals weren't exactly uncommon, and as much as he cared, he couldn't spend his entire shift dealing with one lost puppy. Still, something about the way it stood there, watching him, lingered in his mind. He took a few more steps forward, then 10, then 20. The street opened up into a slightly busier intersection, with more movement now, cars passing by, a couple of pedestrians crossing. The normal rhythm of the city had begun. Daniel focused ahead, until he heard it again. That soft, quick patter of tiny paws. Closer. Persistent. He stopped abruptly and turned around. The puppy was still there, closer than before. Its little legs moved quickly as it tried to keep up, its ears bouncing slightly with each step. But what caught Daniel's attention wasn't just the fact that it was following him. It was the way it looked at him. Not playful, not curious, but focused, almost determined. Daniel let out a slow breath, placing his hands on his hips. "You serious right now?" he said quietly. The puppy stopped a few feet away, its tail giving a small, hesitant wag, but its eyes never left him. Daniel glanced around again, scanning the area more carefully this time. "Hey," he called out, raising his voice slightly. "Anyone missing a puppy?" A man across the street looked over briefly, then shook his head and kept walking. A woman pushing a stroller didn't even notice. No one claimed it. No one even seemed interested. Daniel looked back down. The puppy was still there, still watching, still waiting. He crouched again, this time a little more cautiously. "All right, let's try this," he murmured. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small protein bar, tearing off a piece and placing it gently on the ground between them. "There you go," he said. "Eat that, and then go on, all right?" He stepped back slightly, giving the puppy space. For a moment, nothing happened. The puppy glanced down at the food, then back up at Daniel. And then, it didn't move, didn't touch the food, didn't even sniff it. Daniel frowned. That's weird. Most strays wouldn't hesitate. Hunger usually overpowered everything else. But this one? It didn't seem interested in food at all. Only him. Daniel straightened slowly, brushing his hands together. "Okay, that's enough," he said, more firmly now. He turned and started walking again, this time quicker, more deliberate. Surely, this would lose it. But within seconds, the sound returned, faster now, trying to keep up. Daniel didn't stop immediately. He kept walking, testing it. The puppy followed, step for step, refusing to fall behind. Finally, Daniel stopped once more, turning around with a mix of disbelief and growing unease. The puppy stopped too, right on cue, its chest rising and falling slightly faster now from the effort. But its eyes, still locked on him, still unwavering. Daniel narrowed his gaze, something shifting inside him. This wasn't normal behavior. Not for a stray. Not for a puppy this small. He looked at it for a long second, then quietly said, "Why are you following me?" Daniel stood still, his question hanging in the air. "Why are you following me?" The puppy didn't answer, of course. It just stared at him, unblinking, unmoving. For a brief moment, the world around them seemed to fade into the background. The distant traffic, the murmurs of people passing by, all of it dulled by the strange intensity of that tiny gaze. Daniel exhaled slowly, trying to shake off the feeling creeping into his chest. "This is ridiculous," he muttered. He turned again, determined this time to ignore it completely. But before he could take more than a few steps, the puppy suddenly ran ahead of him. Fast. Startlingly fast for something so small. Daniel stopped, watching as it darted a few feet in front of him, then turned around and waited, its tail stiff, its ears alert, eyes locked on him. Daniel frowned. "Okay." He took a step forward. The puppy immediately moved again, running a little further ahead this time, then stopping, turning, waiting. Daniel's pace slowed. "What are you doing?" he murmured. He walked forward again. And again, the puppy repeated the same behavior. Run ahead. Stop. Turn. Wait. Over and over. A pattern. Clear. Intentional. Daniel's expression shifted, the confusion in his eyes slowly giving way to something sharper. Recognition. This wasn't random. This wasn't a lost puppy wandering aimlessly. It was trying to show him something. But what? Daniel glanced down the direction the puppy kept running toward. It wasn't a main road, not a place people usually went unless they had a reason. A quieter stretch, more isolated. He hesitated. Years of training kicked in instantly. Never follow blindly. Always assess risk. But at the same time, this didn't feel like a trap. It felt urgent. The puppy let out a small whine, breaking his thoughts. Daniel looked back at it. It hadn't moved this time. It just stood there, its tiny body tense, its eyes almost pleading, as if it was waiting for him to understand. "All right, hold on," Daniel said, raising a hand slightly. He stepped forward again, slower now. Careful. Observing. The puppy reacted immediately, running ahead once more. Then stopping. Looking back. Daniel followed a few more steps before stopping again. His mind raced. "Am I seriously thinking this dog is trying to guide me?" he thought. It sounded absurd, completely irrational. And yet, every movement the puppy made was deliberate, focused. There was no hesitation in it. No confusion. Only purpose. Daniel crossed his arms briefly, watching. Testing. The puppy shifted slightly, pacing back and forth in a small circle now, letting out another soft, anxious sound. Then it ran back toward him. Quickly. Almost urgently. It reached his feet, then turned again, running ahead. This time stopping even closer than before. As if it was saying, "Come on faster." Daniel's jaw tightened slightly. This wasn't normal behavior. Not even close. And the longer he watched, the more that uneasy feeling in his chest grew stronger. Something was wrong. Not with the puppy, but somewhere else. Somewhere ahead. Daniel looked once more at the direction it kept pointing him toward. Quiet. Still. Too still. Then he looked back down at the puppy. It stood there again, waiting. Not playful. Not distracted. Completely focused on him. Daniel let out a slow breath. "What are you trying to show me?" Daniel stared at the puppy for a long moment, the question still echoing in his mind. "What are you trying to show me?" But then, just as quickly, he shook his head. "No," he muttered under his breath. "I'm not doing this." He straightened his posture, forcing his thoughts back into place. He was a police officer, not someone who followed stray animals into unknown areas based on instinct alone. It didn't matter how strange this felt. It didn't matter how intentional the puppy's behavior seemed. He had responsibilities, procedures, rules. Daniel turned away. And this time, he didn't hesitate. He started walking in the opposite direction, away from the quiet path, back toward the main street where everything was normal, controlled, predictable. For a few seconds, there was silence. No footsteps behind him. No soft patter. Nothing. Daniel exhaled slightly, almost relieved. "See," he said quietly to himself. "Just a stray. That's all." He kept walking. But then, a sharp, desperate bark cut through the air. Daniel froze. It wasn't loud, but it wasn't playful either. It was urgent. He turned slowly. The puppy was no longer standing still. It was running toward him, fast. Its tiny legs moved as quickly as they could, its body almost stumbling as it rushed forward. When it reached him, it didn't stop at a distance this time. It came right up to him, circling his legs, letting out small, frantic sounds. Daniel frowned, stepping back slightly. Hey, easy," he said, trying to calm it. But the puppy didn't calm down. If anything, it got worse. It ran a few feet ahead again, toward that same direction, then immediately turned back, barking. Short, sharp, then ran back to him again, back and forth, over and over, faster each time. "All right, that's enough," Daniel said more firmly now, his voice tightening. He tried to step around it, but the puppy moved with him, blocking his path, looking up at him with wide, desperate eyes. And then, it let out a sound that made Daniel stop completely. A soft, broken whimper. Not loud, not dramatic, but filled with something raw, something real. The puppy lowered its body slightly, its ears flattening as it looked up at him. And for the first time, Daniel saw it clearly. Fear. Not fear of him, but fear of something else. Something it didn't want him to walk away from. Daniel swallowed, his chest tightening unexpectedly. "This is he started, then stopped. He didn't finish the sentence. Because suddenly, he wasn't so sure anymore. He took a step back. Then, another. Trying to create distance. Trying to reset. But the puppy followed instantly. Closer than before. Refusing to let that space exist. It moved right beside him now, its small body brushing lightly against his boot as if trying to anchor him there. As if letting him leave wasn't an option. Daniel looked down at it, his expression conflicted. This wasn't normal behavior. It wasn't random. It wasn't coincidence. And yet, walking away still felt like the logical choice. The safe choice. He exhaled slowly, forcing himself to stay grounded. I can't just follow you, he said quietly. I don't even know what this is. The puppy didn't respond. It just looked up at him again. Still. Silent. Waiting. And somehow, that silence felt heavier than anything else. Daniel hesitated. Just for a second. Then, with a firm shake of his head, he turned once more and started walking away. But this time, even he could feel it. Something about this didn't feel right. Not even close. Daniel hadn't made it more than a few steps before he felt it again. That presence behind him. Closer now. Closer than before. He didn't even need to turn around to know. The puppy was still there. Still following. Still refusing to give up. Daniel stopped, his shoulders tightening slightly as he let out a slow breath. This doesn't make any sense, he murmured. But deep down, something was beginning to shift. Because this wasn't just persistence anymore. It was urgency. He turned again, more slowly this time. The puppy stood just inches away now, its tiny chest rising and falling rapidly, its breathing uneven from running back and forth. But its eyes, they hadn't changed. Still locked on him. Still intense. Still pleading. Daniel crouched down again, this time without hesitation. Hey, he said softly, his voice lower now, calmer. The puppy didn't back away. Didn't hesitate. It stepped forward slightly, as if it had been waiting for this moment. Daniel studied it closely. Up close, he could see more details now. Its fur was dirty, not just from wandering, but from somewhere rough. There were faint scratches along its legs. Tiny, but noticeable. And its paws. They weren't just dusty. They were worn, as if it had been running for a long time. Daniel's expression shifted. You've been out here a while, haven't you? He whispered. The puppy tilted its head slightly. But instead of relaxing, it suddenly turned again and ran back toward that same direction. Faster this time. More desperate. Daniel watched as it stopped a few feet away, turning sharply, its body tense as it looked back at him, waiting. Then it barked. Once. Short. Urgent. Then, again. Louder. Daniel remained where he was, his mind racing. This was different now. Before, it had felt strange. Now, it felt serious. The puppy ran back to him again, this time pressing against his leg, its small body trembling slightly. Then it turned again, running ahead, but only a few steps this time. Not as far. As if it didn't want to risk losing him. Daniel exhaled slowly, his heart beginning to beat a little faster. What is going on? He muttered. The puppy looked back again, its ears flattened, its body low to the ground. And then, it did something that made Daniel freeze. It reached up and gently tugged at the bottom of his pant leg. Not aggressively, not playfully, but carefully, deliberately. A pull. Then, another. Then, it stepped back, looking up at him again. Daniel stared down at it, his thoughts coming to a halt. That wasn't random. That wasn't instinct. That was communication. Clear. Intentional. The puppy wasn't just following him. It was trying to lead him. And it needed him to understand. Daniel swallowed, his chest tightening as he looked into its eyes again. There was no confusion there. No hesitation. Only fear. And urgency. And something else. Something deeper. Something that felt almost human. A silent plea. Daniel slowly stood up, his gaze shifting toward the direction the puppy had been pointing this entire time. The quiet path. The stillness. The unknown. He looked back down at the puppy. It didn't move. Didn't bark. Didn't run. It just stood there, waiting. as if everything depended on what he did next. Daniel took a slow breath. And for the first time since this started, he didn't feel like he could just walk away anymore. Daniel stood there, unmoving, his eyes fixed on the small puppy in front of him. The world around him seemed quieter now, distant, like everything else had faded away, leaving just this moment, just this choice. He glanced once more toward the main street behind him, the safe direction, the familiar one, the one he was supposed to follow. Then he looked back ahead, toward the path the puppy had been pointing to all along. Still, silent, uncertain, Daniel exhaled slowly, running a hand over the back of his neck. "This is crazy," he whispered. But even as he said it, he didn't sound convinced, because deep down he already knew. This wasn't random. This wasn't coincidence. And whatever was waiting ahead, it mattered. The puppy shifted slightly, stepping forward just a little, as if sensing the change in him. Its tail didn't wag. Its body wasn't relaxed. It was tense, focused, waiting. Daniel looked down at it one last time. "All right," he said quietly. The word barely left his mouth before the puppy reacted. Instantly, it turned and ran forward, not hesitating, not looking back right away. It moved with purpose now, faster, more direct than before. Daniel watched it for a second. Then, with a deep breath, he followed. At first, his steps were slow, measured. Every instinct he had told him to stay alert, to stay cautious. His eyes scanned the area automatically, taking in every detail, the empty sidewalks, the closed doors, the lack of movement. It was too quiet, but the puppy didn't slow down. It ran ahead, then stopped, turned, waited. And the moment Daniel stepped forward again, it continued. The pattern was the same, but now there was no hesitation between them, no resistance. Daniel was committed, and the puppy knew it. They moved together now, one leading, one following. The air seemed heavier the further they went. The sounds of the city faded behind them, replaced by an unsettling stillness. Daniel's senses sharpened. His posture shifted. This wasn't just curiosity anymore. This was a situation, and he was walking straight into it. The puppy suddenly stopped again, more abruptly this time. Daniel slowed, watching closely. It didn't turn immediately. Instead, it stood still for a moment, frozen. Then slowly, it looked back at him, its eyes wide, alert. Daniel felt a slight tension build in his chest. "What is it?" he murmured. The puppy let out a soft sound, almost like a breath. Then it turned again and moved forward, but slower now, more careful, as if they were getting closer, closer to something. Daniel's steps became quieter, more controlled, every movement deliberate. He glanced around again. Still nothing. No people. No movement. Just silence. And that same strange feeling growing stronger with every step. They had gone too far now to turn back. Daniel knew that. He felt it. Whatever this was, he was already part of it. The puppy stopped once more. This time, it didn't move at all. It just stood there, waiting. And when Daniel finally caught up, standing just a few feet behind it, he realized something. This wasn't just about following anymore. They had arrived somewhere. And whatever came next, there was no going back. Daniel slowed his pace as the puppy came to a complete stop. They were no longer near the main road. The sounds of traffic had disappeared entirely, replaced by a heavy, almost unnatural silence. The kind that made every small movement feel louder than it should. Daniel's eyes scanned the area carefully. This part of the city wasn't exactly abandoned, but it wasn't active either. A narrow path stretched ahead, partially hidden between old fences and overgrown bushes. The pavement here was cracked, uneven, like it hadn't been maintained in years. This place, Daniel muttered quietly. He didn't like it. Not one bit. The puppy took a few slow steps forward, then stopped again, glancing back at him as if to make sure he was still there. Daniel stayed close now. No more distance between them. His posture had changed completely, alert, controlled, every sense sharpened. This was no longer about a stray animal. This was an active situation. The puppy moved again, guiding him deeper into the narrow path. The further they went, the tighter the space felt. The fences on either side closed in slightly, creating a confined corridor. Dry leaves crunched under Daniel's boots, the sound echoing faintly in the stillness. Too quiet. Way too quiet. Daniel's hand instinctively hovered near his radio. Just in case. He didn't call it in yet, but he was close. Very close. The puppy suddenly slowed again. Its movements changed. Less running now. More cautious steps. It stayed low to the ground, its body tense, ears flicking at every faint sound. Daniel noticed immediately. "You feel it too, huh?" he whispered. Something was wrong here. Not obvious. Not visible. But present. A feeling. A shift in the air that didn't belong. The puppy stopped once more, this time near a slight turn in the path, where the bushes grew thicker and blocked most of the view ahead. It didn't move forward right away. Instead, it stood there frozen, watching, listening. Daniel approached slowly, careful not to make sudden movements. "What is it?" he asked under his breath. The puppy glanced back at him briefly, then turned its head toward the hidden area ahead. Focused. Locked in. Daniel followed its gaze. But from where he stood, he couldn't see anything clearly. Just shadows. Shapes. Nothing defined. He took another step forward. Then another. The air felt heavier here. Thicker. As if something ahead was pulling everything into silence. The puppy let out a soft whine. Barely audible. But enough. Daniel stopped immediately. That sound wasn't random. It wasn't curiosity. It was fear. Real fear. He crouched slightly, lowering his center of gravity, his eyes narrowing as he focused on the space ahead. "Stay behind me," he said quietly, almost instinctively. The puppy didn't move. It stayed exactly where it was, watching him now, trusting him. Daniel took a slow breath, steadying himself. Then he moved forward, carefully stepping past the puppy, positioning himself slightly ahead of it. For the first time since this began, he wasn't following anymore. He was leading, protecting, and whatever was waiting just beyond that hidden turn, he was about to face it first. Daniel stepped closer, closer, until the edge of the path opened just enough for him to finally see something. Not clear, not fully, but enough to know this wasn't nothing, and whatever it was, it shouldn't be there. Daniel didn't move for a second. His eyes stayed fixed on the space ahead, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. It wasn't clear, not yet, but something about it felt wrong, out of place. He took another slow step forward. The ground beneath his boots shifted slightly, loose dirt and dry leaves sliding under his weight. And that's when he noticed it. The ground wasn't untouched. It had been disturbed. Not naturally. There were marks, faint but visible, as if something had been dragged. Daniel's expression hardened. He crouched slightly, studying the ground more closely. The lines weren't straight. They were uneven, messy, like whatever caused them hadn't been controlled, or hadn't wanted to go. A cold feeling settled in his chest. Behind him, the puppy let out a sharp bark. Daniel turned his head slightly. The puppy wasn't calm anymore. It was pacing now, back and forth in short, restless movements, its small body tense, its ears pinned back. It let out another bark, higher this time, more urgent. "I see it," Daniel said quietly, his voice steady but low. He stood up slowly, his eyes scanning the area again. And that's when he noticed something else. A piece of fabric, caught on a broken section of fence. Daniel stepped closer, carefully pulling it free. It was torn, roughly, and slightly dirty. His grip tightened. This wasn't just random debris. This was recent. Very recent. The puppy barked again, louder now. Daniel turned back toward it. "All right, I hear you," he said, more firmly this time. His tone had changed. There was no more hesitation left. This was a situation. He reached for his radio, pressing the button. "Dispatch, this is Officer Daniel," he said quietly but clearly. "I've got a possible situation, unknown circumstances. I'm checking it out now." A brief pause. Then a voice responded. "Copy that. Do you need backup?" Daniel hesitated for half a second. His eyes moved back toward the direction ahead, toward whatever was waiting. "Stand by," he replied. "I'll confirm shortly." He lowered the radio, but didn't put it away. Not yet. The puppy suddenly ran forward again, this time faster than before. But it didn't go far, just around the bend. Then it stopped and started barking, repeatedly, sharp, desperate. Daniel's pulse quickened. "Hey!" he called out instinctively, moving forward. His steps were quicker now, more urgent, every sense on high alert. As he rounded the corner, he saw more. The ground was worse here. Clear signs of struggle, scattered debris, broken branches, and those same drag marks leading further ahead. Daniel's jaw tightened. Something definitely happened here, he muttered. The puppy stood just ahead, barking toward a specific point now. Focused, locked in. It wasn't running back and forth anymore. It had found something. Daniel approached slowly, his breathing steady but controlled. "Easy," he whispered, more to himself than anything else. The puppy stepped back slightly as he got closer, but it didn't leave. It stayed near, watching, waiting. Daniel took one more step forward, then another, and as his view finally cleared, his entire body went still. Because whatever was ahead, it wasn't just a sign anymore. It was something real, and it was worse than he expected. Daniel's breath caught in his throat as the scene came into full view. There, partially hidden behind a cluster of broken branches and scattered debris, was a person, lying on the ground, motionless. For a split second, Daniel didn't move. His training kicked in, but so did the shock. Then instinct took over. He rushed forward immediately. "Hey, can you hear me?" he called out, dropping to his knees beside them. The person, a young woman, was pale, her clothes torn slightly, dirt smudged across her arms and face. Her breathing was shallow, barely noticeable at first glance. But she was alive. Daniel quickly checked her pulse. Weak, but there. "Stay with me," he said firmly, his voice steady despite the urgency building inside him. Behind him, the puppy let out a sharp, emotional bark. Daniel turned his head slightly. The puppy had run straight to the woman. It circled her once, then pressed itself gently against her side, whining softly now, no longer frantic, but filled with something deeper. Relief, fear, love. Daniel's eyes narrowed slightly as he watched the interaction. "You know her," he muttered. The puppy looked up at him briefly, as if confirming it, then returned its attention to the woman, nudging her lightly with its nose. The woman stirred, just barely. A faint sound escaped her lips. Daniel leaned closer. Hey, stay with me," he said again, more urgently now. "You're going to be okay." Her eyes fluttered slightly, struggling to open, confused, disoriented. "Am I?" she whispered weakly. Her voice was barely audible. Daniel glanced at the puppy again, then back at her. "Your dog?" he asked gently. Her lips moved again. A faint nod. Daniel exhaled slowly, the realization settling in. This wasn't random. The puppy hadn't been wandering. It had been searching, looking for help, looking for him. His chest tightened slightly. If he had ignored it, if he had walked away, he pushed the thought aside quickly. No time for that now. Daniel reached for his radio immediately. "Dispatch, this is Officer Daniel," he said firmly. "I've located an injured civilian. Female, conscious but weak. Possible trauma. I need medical assistance immediately." "Copy that," the voice responded. "Units and paramedics are on the way." Daniel set the radio down, turning his full attention back to the woman. "Help is coming," he assured her. The puppy stayed pressed against her, its small body trembling slightly, but it didn't leave her side. It had done its job. It had found help, but it wasn't done yet. Daniel carefully looked around the area again, piecing things together. The drag marks, the broken branches, the torn fabric. This hadn't been an accident. Something had happened here. Something serious. His jaw tightened. But right now, the priority was clear. Keep her conscious. Keep her breathing. He gently adjusted her position, making sure she was as stable as possible. "Stay with me," he repeated softly. Her eyes flickered again, a little more aware this time. Don't leave," she whispered. Daniel shook his head slightly. "I'm not going anywhere," he said. The puppy let out a soft whine, licking her hand gently. The woman's fingers twitched in response. And in that small, fragile moment, everything became clear. This tiny animal had saved her life. Daniel looked at the puppy again, something shifting in his expression. Respect, amazement, and something deeper. Because this wasn't luck. This wasn't coincidence. This was loyalty. Pure. Unquestionable. And if it hadn't refused to give up, he never would have found her in time. Not even close. Daniel's focus snapped fully into place. There was no more confusion. No more hesitation. Only urgency. He leaned closer to the woman, keeping his voice steady, controlled. "Stay with me, all right? Help is on the way," he said. Her breathing was still shallow, uneven. Every second mattered. Daniel quickly removed his jacket, folding it and gently placing it under her head to keep her stable. He checked her pulse again. Still weak, but holding. "Come on, stay with me," he muttered under his breath. The puppy stayed pressed against her side, whining softly now, its body trembling with every breath she took. It didn't leave. Not even for a second. Daniel glanced at it briefly. "You did good," he said quietly. But the puppy didn't react. It was completely focused on her, as if nothing else in the world mattered. Daniel shifted slightly, scanning her for visible injuries. There were no obvious wounds, but the signs were clear. Something serious had happened. Internal, or impact-related. Either way, time wasn't on their side. He grabbed his radio again. "Dispatch, what's the ETA?" he asked, his tone sharper now. 3 minutes out, came the response. 3 minutes. It felt too long. Daniel looked back down at the woman. Her eyes fluttered again, weaker this time. "Hey, stay with me," he said quickly, gently tapping her shoulder. "Look at me. You're okay. Just keep your eyes open." She tried. But it was a struggle. "Cold," she whispered faintly. "I know," Daniel said, adjusting his jacket around her more securely. "Just hang on." The puppy let out a small, distressed sound, licking her hand again, as if trying to wake her. Daniel's jaw tightened. "Come on, don't do this," he murmured. The silence around them felt heavier now. Every breath, every second, louder. Then, a distant sound broke through. Sirens. Faint at first, but getting closer. Daniel exhaled sharply. "All right, good," he said under his breath. He leaned closer again. "You hear that?" he said softly to her. "That's for you. You're going to be okay." Her eyes barely opened this time, but they moved. Just enough. The puppy's ears perked up slightly at the sound of the sirens, but it didn't move away. It stayed right where it was, guarding her, waiting. Daniel looked down at both of them, something tightening in his chest again. This tiny animal had carried all of this alone. Until now. The sirens grew louder, closer, fast. Daniel raised his hand slightly, ready to signal them in. "Over here," he called out. Moments later, the paramedics rushed into view, moving quickly toward them with equipment in hand. "What do we have?" one of them asked immediately. "Injured female," Daniel replied. "Weak pulse. Semi-conscious. Possible internal trauma." They nodded, already moving into action. "All right, we've got her," one said, kneeling beside her. Daniel shifted back slightly, giving him space, but he didn't step far. Not yet. He stayed close, watching, as they worked. Because even though help had arrived, this still wasn't over. Not until she made it through. And right now, it was still a race against time. Daniel stepped back slightly as the paramedics worked, his eyes never leaving the woman or the small puppy pressed against her side. "Careful, easy," one of the medics said as they began checking her vitals more thoroughly. Another adjusted equipment, moving quickly but calmly. Professional. Precise. But Daniel barely heard them, because his attention kept drifting back to the puppy. It hadn't moved. Not even when the paramedics arrived. Not when strangers surrounded her. Not when everything became louder, faster, more intense. It stayed right there. Close. Protective. Its small body still trembling. Its eyes fixed on her face as if waiting for something. Anything. To change. Daniel swallowed slowly, something heavy building in his chest. "You stayed with her this whole time," he murmured quietly. The words weren't meant for anyone. Just a thought. but it hit him harder than expected. Because now, everything was clear. The following, the barking, the urgency, the refusal to leave. It all made sense. The puppy hadn't been lost. It had been searching, running, looking for help, for someone who would listen, for someone who wouldn't ignore it. Daniel's jaw tightened. A single thought pushed its way forward. What if I had walked away? The question hit him like a weight. What if he had ignored it like he almost did? What if he had dismissed it as just another stray? What if he hadn't turned back? His chest tightened. Because he already knew the answer. She wouldn't have been found. Not in time. Not in this place. Not like this. Daniel exhaled slowly, running a hand over his face. That dog, one of the paramedics said quietly, glancing at it. It led you here? Daniel nodded slightly. Yeah, he replied, his voice lower now. It didn't give up. The paramedic shook his head, a hint of disbelief in his expression. That's incredible. Daniel didn't respond. Because incredible didn't feel like the right word. Not anymore. This wasn't just something impressive. This was something deeper. Something that didn't have a simple explanation. He looked at the puppy again. It finally shifted slightly, pressing closer as the medics prepared to move the woman onto a stretcher. It let out a soft whine. Low. Emotional. Almost like it understood what was happening. Daniel crouched down slightly, closer to it this time. Hey, he said quietly. The puppy didn't look at him. Not immediately. Its attention stayed on her. Still focused. Still loyal. Daniel felt something in his chest tighten again. You knew she needed help, he said softly. Didn't you? The puppy finally glanced at him for a brief second. Just a second. But it was enough. There was something in that look. Not confusion. Not fear. But awareness. Then it turned back to her again. Daniel nodded slowly, almost to himself. Yeah, he whispered. You knew. He stood back up as the paramedics carefully lifted her onto the stretcher. The puppy moved alongside them, refusing to be separated, staying as close as it possibly could. Daniel watched it, his expression no longer just focused. Now, there was something else there. Respect. And something deeper. Because in all his years, he had never seen anything like this. Not even close. The stretcher locked into place with a sharp click. All right, let's move, one of the paramedics said, gripping the handles as they lifted. Daniel stepped aside just enough to give them space, but his eyes never left the woman as they carried her carefully down the narrow path. The puppy stayed right beside them. Every step, every movement. It didn't fall behind, didn't hesitate. It followed as closely as its small legs allowed, letting out soft, anxious whines as if trying to stay connected to her with every breath. Easy there, one of the medics said gently, glancing down at it. We've got her. But the puppy didn't seem convinced. Daniel walked alongside them now, matching their pace. His presence steady, grounded. But inside, everything still felt tight, unsettled. They reached the end of the path where the ambulance was waiting. Its back doors already open. Bright. Clinical. Ready. On 3, a medic said. 1, 2, 3. They lifted the stretcher into the ambulance smoothly, securing it in place. Daniel stepped closer instinctively, watching as they adjusted monitors and equipment around her. Pulse is still weak, one of them said. We need to move now. The puppy stopped just outside the ambulance. For the first time, it hesitated, its small body frozen at the edge, looking up at the open doors, then back at Daniel, confused, unsure. Daniel crouched slightly, his voice softer now. It's okay, he said gently. Go on. The puppy looked at him for a second, then back at her. Then, without another moment of hesitation, it jumped inside, carefully, awkwardly, but determined. The paramedics exchanged a brief look. Then one of them nodded. Let it stay, he said quietly. It's not going anywhere anyway. Daniel stepped back slightly as they closed the doors. The loud slam echoed for a moment. Then, silence, followed immediately by the sharp sound of the siren starting up again. The ambulance pulled away quickly, tires gripping the pavement as it sped off down the road. Daniel stood still, watching it disappear. His hands rested on his hips, his breathing finally beginning to slow. But his mind, it was still racing. Everything had happened so fast. Too fast. And yet, if they had been even a few minutes later, he stopped that thought, didn't let it finish. Instead, he looked down at the empty path behind him, the broken branches, the disturbed ground, the place where it all could have ended differently. Then he looked back toward the road, where the ambulance had gone. His jaw tightened slightly. "Hang in there," he said quietly, almost to himself. Because now, there was nothing left to do but wait and hope. Hours passed. Long, quiet, heavy hours. Daniel sat outside the hospital, his elbows resting on his knees, his hands loosely clasped together. The early morning had long faded into afternoon, but time didn't feel normal anymore. It felt stretched, uneven, like every minute carried more weight than it should. Beside him, the puppy lay curled up on the ground. For the first time since everything happened, it was still, not restless, not pacing, just waiting, its small chest rising and falling slowly, its eyes half open as if it refused to fully relax. Daniel glanced down at it. "You're still holding on, huh?" he said quietly. The puppy didn't respond, but its ears twitched slightly. It was listening, always listening. Daniel leaned back slightly in his seat, staring ahead at the hospital entrance. People came and went, nurses, visitors, families, but none of it registered the same way. His focus stayed locked on one thing, waiting for news, waiting for an answer. He exhaled slowly, running a hand through his hair. "Come on," he murmured under his breath. He wasn't used to this part. Waiting wasn't something he handled well. Out in the field, there was always something to do, something to fix. But here, there was nothing, just uncertainty. The puppy shifted slightly, lifting its head. Its eyes moved toward the hospital doors, focused, alert. Daniel noticed immediately. "You hear something?" he asked. The puppy stood up slowly now, its body more awake than before. Its tail didn't wag, but it wasn't tense either. It just stood there, watching. Daniel followed its gaze. A few seconds later, the doors opened. A doctor stepped out, scanning the area briefly. Daniel stood up instantly. "That's him," he said quietly. The puppy moved closer to his side. Together, they walked forward. "Doctor," Daniel called out, his voice steady, but tight underneath. The doctor turned toward them. For a brief second, his expression was unreadable. And that second felt longer than it should have. Daniel's chest tightened. "How is she?" he asked. The doctor paused. Then, a small smile appeared. "She's stable," he said. Daniel exhaled sharply, the tension releasing all at once. "Both of them," the doctor added. Daniel blinked slightly. "Both?" The doctor nodded. "Yes," he said. "She's going to recover." Daniel closed his eyes briefly, letting the relief settle in. "Thank God," he whispered. Beside him, the puppy's ears perked up. It didn't fully understand the words, but it felt the shift, the change. Its tail gave a small, cautious wag. Daniel looked down at it, a faint smile finally breaking through. "You hear that?" he said softly. "She made it." The puppy looked up at him, then back toward the hospital doors. Its body no longer tense, no longer desperate, just calm. For the first time since this began, Daniel straightened slightly, looking back at the doctor. "Can we see her?" he asked. The doctor nodded. "In a little while," he said. "She's resting now." Daniel nodded in return. "That's fine." Because now, they weren't racing against time anymore. They had made it through. And that alone was everything. A little while later, Daniel stood quietly just outside the hospital room. Through the small glass window, he could see her, resting, still pale, still weak, but alive. Machines monitored her condition with soft, steady beeps, each one a reminder that she had made it through. Beside her bed, the puppy, curled up close, its tiny body pressed gently against the blanket, as if making sure she was really there, as if making sure she wasn't going anywhere again. Daniel let out a slow breath. A nurse stepped beside him, her voice calm. "She's been asking about him," she said softly. Daniel glanced at her. "The dog." The nurse nodded. She said his name is Milo. Daniel looked back through the glass. Milo, he repeated quietly. It fit. The nurse continued gently. She lives alone. That little one is all she has. They're very close. Daniel's expression softened slightly. That explains a lot, he murmured. The nurse nodded again. She said they were out for a walk earlier, she added. She must have fallen, maybe hit something she doesn't remember everything clearly yet. Daniel's eyes shifted slightly as he processed it. The broken branches, the disturbed ground, the drag marks. It all made sense now. She hadn't been left there. She had fallen. And no one had seen. No one. Except Milo. Daniel looked back inside again. The puppy lifted its head slightly, as if sensing his presence. Their eyes met for a brief moment. And Daniel felt it again. That same quiet understanding. You stayed with her, he said softly, almost to himself. The nurse smiled faintly. He never left her side, she said. Even in the ambulance, they said he refused to move. Daniel let out a small breath, shaking his head slightly. He paused. There weren't many words for something like that. The nurse glanced at him. She also said something else, she added. Daniel looked at her. She remembers Milo running off, the nurse said. At first, she thought he got scared. Daniel's gaze shifted again, back to the puppy. But he didn't run away, he said quietly. The nurse shook her head. No, she said softly. He went to find help. Silence settled between them for a moment. Daniel looked through the glass again, watching Milo rest beside her, completely at peace now. Not anxious, not desperate, just there, where he belonged. Daniel's jaw tightened slightly, emotion rising in his chest. All that time, he murmured. The nurse nodded gently. He knew she needed someone, she said. Daniel let out a slow breath. And for the first time, he truly understood. This wasn't just loyalty. This was something more, something deeper. Because that tiny puppy had refused to give up, not even for a second. Later that evening, Daniel finally stepped into the hospital room. The atmosphere was quiet, calm. Soft light filled the space, replacing the urgency that had once surrounded it. She was awake now, still weak, but conscious. Her eyes shifted toward him as he entered, a faint smile forming despite the exhaustion on her face. You came back, she said softly. Daniel nodded, stepping closer. Had to make sure you were all right, he replied. His voice was steady, but there was something behind it now, something heavier. Her hand rested gently against the blanket, just inches from where Milo lay curled beside her. The puppy stirred slightly, lifting its head. The moment it saw Daniel, it sat up, alert, but not tense, just aware. Daniel looked at it, a small, quiet smile forming. Hey partner, he said softly. Milo tilted his head slightly, as if recognizing the voice. Then, without hesitation, he shifted closer to the woman again, pressing gently against her side. Still protecting, still staying close. Daniel's smile faded just a little, not from sadness, but from something deeper. She followed his gaze, her fingers moving slowly to rest against Milo's fur. He never leaves me, she whispered. Daniel nodded once. I know, he said quietly. There was a pause, a quiet moment where nothing needed to be said. Then, thank you, she said. Daniel blinked slightly. For what? Her eyes shifted toward him fully now. For listening to him, she said softly. For not walking away. Daniel didn't answer right away, because he remembered that moment, standing there, debating whether to leave, whether to ignore it. His chest tightened. I almost did, he admitted quietly. Her expression softened. But you didn't. Daniel looked down at Milo again, the small dog who had run through streets, who had refused to give up, who had trusted him, without knowing anything about him. Daniel swallowed, something catching in his throat. He crouched down slightly, bringing himself closer to Milo's level. For a moment, he just looked at him. No words, just understanding. Then slowly, he reached out and gently placed his hand on the puppy's head. Milo didn't move, didn't flinch. He simply stayed there, accepting it. Daniel's hand rested there for a second longer than expected. And that's when it hit him. Everything. How close this had been. How easily it could have ended differently. How one small decision had changed everything. Daniel's eyes lowered slightly, his voice quieter now. "You saved her," he whispered. Milo blinked slowly, calm, unaware of the weight of those words. Daniel let out a slow breath, his hand still resting on the puppy's head. And for the first time that day, he couldn't hold it in anymore. His composure cracked, just slightly, but enough. Because sometimes, even the strongest people break a little, especially when they realize a tiny, helpless puppy was the real hero all along.